channel. Guys, I've been out here working on the VT1100 a little bit, polishing things up, changing out a few parts, and it is about 1.5 million degrees. It's midsummer here in North Carolina, and it is sweltering hot. I'm going to be cleaning out the carburetors and putting in some kits. We've got a few issues with runnability, a little bit of popping in the carburetors. The idle air screw on the front cylinder isn't really doing anything, so we're going to open everything up, put in some new gaskets, clean everything out, and get it rebuilt and ready to go. I've also got a few extra main jets to kind of dial everything in. I've also changed out the slash cut pipes for a set of stock pipes, and we'll see how that works out. Sounds pretty good when it's running, but let's go ahead and get started with these carburetors. Our first step is going to be taking off the seat assembly, and to do that, right under the rear of the seat you have these Phillips screws, and you just have one on each side. You take those off and the seat just curls right out and comes off very easily. Let's get that off. The next step is to remove the fuel line that's going to the system from the petcock. Turn your petcock off and replace it with another piece of line and just block it off. There's also a vent line right here. You're just going to pull that down off that nipple, just like so, and it should be ready to unbolt. There are only 2 bolts holding the tank on, one here at the rear and one there at the front. Once the bolts are removed, the tank just pulls right off. So we'll remove that and set it aside. Once the fuel tank is out of the way, we need to remove our overflow for the coolant system. That is right here, and it's just one bolt that holds it in. Once the bolt is removed, we take our 2 lines off, one here and then one on the very bottom on the side. Just remove those lines and the tank comes right out. With the overflow tank removed, we can access the 2 clamps. One here for this hose, and then the other end of the hose is connected to the rear carburetor. So it's got 2 clamps there, Phillips screws, and you just take a Phillips screwdriver, loosen them, it pulls right off. With that portion of the intake hose removed, you can see that this hose has an inner liner, a steel ring on the inside to keep it from collapsing, so it can clamp down with the other hose. You can see the top of the rear carburetor, and you can see the top of the front carburetor here. I've got the top here, top here. And we have 2 clamps to remove. We have one here on the side, right here, and then we have one here on the top of the front carburetor. Alright, with the intake hoses removed, we can now access the carburetors. And this hose right here on the side coming out of this front carburetor, that's on the fuel rail, and that's coming from the fuel pump. We're going to need to go ahead and pull that hose off there and begin removing these carburetors. Our next step is to remove the choke assembly cables, which are right here, the rear of the carburetor. We have one on this side, which is the left side, the rear carburetor, and the other is located right here on the right side on the front carburetor. You just simply unscrew these and they come right out to pull out as a whole assembly. Let's pull both of those out now. Once we have the choke assemblies removed, we can loosen our clamps for the carburetors themselves on the intake. Next, we remove these 2 Phillips screws here that hold on the throttle cables. Once the plate is removed, we can simply move it forward and remove our throttle cables. Now we remove the fuel pump hose from the rear carburetor. The next step is to go ahead and pop the carburetors loose from the intake boots. In order to do that, you just pull up on them. Sometimes it can take a little bit of force. You have to pull them both up kind of simultaneously. rock them back and forth a little bit. And there they are. Once the carburetors are free, you just maneuver them over to their side. I like to pull the right side up, and they just come right out. You just maneuver them out that way, twist them as they need to be turned. Now that our carburetors are out, we can pop the bottoms off here of the float bowls, and we can go ahead and go through and put in our simple kits. These are the simple kits. These aren't the good kits that I'd like to use, but the supplier was out of those. But we can make do with what we have. Okay, let's pop off these Phillips screws here. Hold on this float bowl. Now that I have our float bowl pulled off there, we can see our jets, our atomizers, okay, and of course our float. Alright, we're going to turn over to the side here, and we're going to pull out our idle air mixture right here. And this little screwdriver, actually it's a snap-on, but Cornwell, whoever your tool truck guy, Mac, whoever, will have these little screwdrivers, and they are one of the most handy things that you can get your hands on. But we're going to go ahead and pull that out of there. You want to turn it in all the way and count how many turns so that you know where to set it back. This one wasn't doing anything, which is part of the reason why I'm tearing it apart, pulling this carburetor off of here, and we're going to go through both of them. But stock should be about 2.5 turns out from seated. Don't seat them too far and too hard, just until they make contact. You can damage these. Let's get that out of there. Once you get the idle air mixture screw out, it should have the screw itself, a needle point on it, a spring, a washer, and an O-ring. Now the O-ring is going to get stuck inside of the hole 99 times out of 100. You're going to have to pick it out, and when you do that, you're going to destroy it. And these kits come with an O-ring to replace those with, so it's not a big deal. Now let's remove our main jet and our atomizer here. The jet that was in it, in the front carburetor, was a 170. It should be a 175, so apparently someone's been in here and changed out some jets. So let's go ahead and pull the other float bowl off and see what the main jet is on the inside of it. Next, let's go ahead and pull out our idle jets. Our idle jets seem to be a 42, which is just fine, and I'm also spraying them out with some gum out carburetor cleaner, carbon choke cleaner. With these, they're a little small, so you have to clog up the side portions here. Just cover those with your finger and push it through, and it goes right out. Now that our main and slow jets are clean and clear, now we can work with our choke circuits. Now my favorite tool for these is a bread tie. You peel it back and you get a straight wire. You can use electrical wire, copper, what have you. You just press it in. You should feel it bottom out as you go down. There we are. Do that on both sides, and then we're going to press our carburetor cleaner straw here, and we should see it come out of the choke circuit hole on the side. And we've got it. Next we're going to change out our float needles. Now to do that, we just need to pry here and push our rod out to the other side like so, and pull it out. Remove our float, and there we are. And there is our needle. Now inside the kit we have our float needle and our float needle seat. So we're going to be replacing both of those. and the needle seat just screws right out and is removed. Our new needle seat is installed, and we just slide our new float needle onto our float, just like so, and it's ready to go back together. Now we replace our float bowl gaskets, one on each side. They just peel right off like so, and you replace it with the one that comes in the kit. Now we put our idle air screws back in, and don't forget to fish out the O-ring on the inside and replace it with the one that comes in the kit. You have your spring, then your washer, and then the O-ring on top like so. Let's pull the tops of the carburetors off where our diaphragms and our needle is. That's just 4 screws, Phillips, around the top. Let's get that off. Once our top is off, we have our spring, and you can see where it's retained by the top here in this indention. Pull our spring out, we have our diaphragm and our slide, and of course our needle. And our retainer on the inside, you just a quarter of a turn counterclockwise, and it comes out of the retainers and we can get to our needle. Once we have our needle, we can see that this one is adjustable. This is an aftermarket that somebody has put in here. The stock needles on the VT line, they're usually not adjustable, but I'm going to lower this one click. Just pull this E-clip off and move it up one space, and that will lower the needle just a little bit. Once both needles have been inspected, we put our assemblies back together and we slide them back in and screw the tops back on. Let's move on to the air cutoff valve. Right behind here there's a diaphragm and O-rings. Let's remove these 2 Phillips screws so we can access that now, and there's one on each side, one for each carburetor. Once the screws are removed, you do have to be a little careful. There's spring tension, so just be aware of that. There's your spring, and of course there's your diaphragm. You just want to inspect your diaphragm and make sure that there's no cracks or tears or signs of premature wear. In your kit you'll find an oblong O-ring, and that's going to go right here. Just pull that out. Should come out with just fingernail force. We'll just pull it out and replace it with the one from the kit. Alright, now we're going to bench sink our carburetors, and if you look inside the throat of the carburetor, you'll see a little hole right there in front of the butterfly. Right there. And where you want your butterfly is just behind that first hole. Just behind the first hole there. So with this being the rear carburetor, you've got your idle adjustment here, and if you notice, as you turn it, it opens that butterfly. You turn it clockwise, so now it's past the first hole. You just want it just past the first hole, so you adjust it to about right there, where it's just past that hole. And for the other carburetor, we're going to use our synchronizing screw here. Okay. And we can see that it's now past too far, so we back it up just a little bit to about right there. And that's where we want it to begin with. Right in that area. Alright, we are ready for reinstallation. Once all of the cables and hoses are hooked back up to the carburetor and it's back in place, we simply put it in place over the intake boots, mouths, and it's always a good idea to take a little Vaseline or petroleum jelly and go around the outside of that carburetor mouth and maybe a little on the outer edge or the inside edge of the intake boot itself. Once we have it lined up, we wiggle and beg and plead with it to go in and press down simultaneously and wiggle back and forth. Alright, now that we've said all of our swear words and we've begged and pleaded with it, it is in. Alright, now we can tighten everything down and go ahead and put all of the intake hoses back on. Now that all of our intake hoses and our overflow tank is back into place and all the lines are hooked up, everything's ready to go, we can put our fuel tank back on. Now that everything is back together, let's go ahead and start it up and see how she sounds. It's much better that pop is gone. The idle speed needs to be adjusted just a little bit, but that's not a big deal. Hopefully this video was informative for you guys. You learned a little bit about carburetors. In the next video I'll probably go over how to make a synchronizer and how to properly synchronize the carburetors. But it sounds pretty good where it is. As long as you do a good static sync on the bench, you should be very, very close. Even with a liquid or a mercury synchronizer, you've got about an inch and a half of difference, and that's absolutely normal. So it sounds great. Idle needs to be adjusted just a little bit, bring it down just a hair. It seems to be 100% better. Alright guys, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button, and since you're down there, you might as well subscribe. Alright, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video.